I find the topic this morning is where a lot of agents fall short, and that is how do we really do a good job at communicating, at counseling, at serving and taking care of buyers and sellers. And I noticed when the market shifted in a lot of areas, listing agents are like, oh my goodness, my listing isn't selling in 3 days, and I don't know what to tell them, and I've never had to do this before, and blah, 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 blah. So panic kind of set in that, and having a process and having a system and having, if you wing it, you get winging results. If you have a system and you have a process, then you get far better results. So today I'm going to share with you what I think is a bulletproof buyer and seller counseling system and a process that will give you a basis to be able to do a better job of communicating through the whole position. A lot of times agents say, well, I don't know what to tell them in that, so they say nothing, and that silence is deafening for our customers. They're like, man, if my agent's not calling me and they're quiet and they don't know what to say and they don't know what to do, that panics them. And so when you're panicked and you're not saying anything, they don't like that whatsoever. So it's all in the follow-up, it's all in the system, and it's just killing them with communications and communications and communications. And here's how we started off. A little bit of a background. It's so important that agents know what their buyer hot button is or their seller hot button is. So take a minute right now, think about all the buyers and legit sellers that you're working with. How many of us know without a shadow of a doubt what their buyer or seller hot button is? Meaning what their why is. Like, why does someone need to or have to or want to buy? Why does somebody need to or want to or have to sell? Okay, and do you know exactly what the root of that reason is? Their motivating factor, their hot button. Okay, you've got to know what your buyer's method of motive is. You've got to know what your seller's method motive is. Their hot button. It's up to you to help them determine that. So you have to understand, the only thing that moves a human's emotional meter is what they're running from or what they're running to. So how many of us have no clue of what our buyers are running to or what our sellers are running to or what our buyers are running from or what they're running away from in that? And that's the reality of it. Now, if you have a buyer with no mo and you have a seller with no mo, then your answer to that is no go. And so one of my mentors taught me this technique called the 5-6-7 technique. And it's, say I was with the seller and I sit down with the seller and I say, hey, thanks for meeting with me today. I just want to get together with you and have an advisement session. And I appreciate you and let you know that your listing is high priority to me and that I'm doing everything I can to get it sold and to help you guys accomplish the goal. But quickly, just 5-6-7 is asking them 6-7 questions deep, getting to the root of what they're running from or running to. A seller is either going to be running from something or running to something. A buyer is going to be running from something or running to something. And it's up to us to use that 5-6-7 deep question process called the 5-6-7 technique to identify what they're running from or what they're running to, pain or pleasure. Okay? So a seller says to me, tell me again, why do we need to sell? Why are you selling? Well, Wade, we've outgrown the house. Okay, so outgrowing the house, tell me what it is about you outgrowing the house. Tell me more about that. Explain to me why. Well, we've got another baby on the way, blah, blah, blah. So I go, and so tell me what that would mean or why that's important, and tell me more about that, and tell me more about that. And we dig deep, deep, deep to just identify that true root and that true hot button of what their motivating factor is of what they're wanting to do it. So in this particular case, it would be that we've outgrown the property and we just need more space and we need more breathing room, and it would just make it more comfortable and more easier and happier for everybody if we just had more space. Okay, so that's an avoidance of pain point, the pain point being too small. So your job as a listing agent and a buyer's agent is to sit these clients down, ask them 7-level deep questions and get to the root. Get to the source of what they're running from or what they're running to. If they're not running from anything, if they're not running to something, there's no pain point or pleasure point, guys. You do not have a legitimate qualified buyer. You do not have a legitimate qualified seller. You have a seller that's Mr. Mrs. Paid too much, need too much, want too much, and no mo, no go. You got a buyer that's just, would like to buy in that, and they want to buy a deal, but they don't want to buy a home. And so I'll talk about that more, about the buyer that wants a deal or do they want a home, and helping them understand the difference between a deal and the difference between a home. Okay, so that's key number one, and step number one is identify what they're running to using that 5-6-7 technique. Any questions on that dialogue and that? How many of us, after describing that really have some buyers and sellers that I don't know what they're running from and what their pain point is or what their pleasure point is. And I got to go back and I got to sit these people down and 5, 6, 7 them and get to the heart and the root of what their motivation and why they want to buy and why they want to sell. How many of us have to do that now?
Yeah, I think we're all raising our hands, but you can't see it.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I find that's a common trait where if you guys don't know what it is, and so it's not our job to say, hey, buy, 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 and to sell, sell, sell. It's our job to remind them of what they're running to and how it would feel if they could stop the running and what they're running away from or what they're running to, or how that would feel if you could solve that problem. That's where you're trying to move their emotional meters and constantly reminding of their avoidance of pain or their desire of pleasure. And that's our job as trusted advisors, is constantly remind them of their avoidance of pain or their desire of pleasure when we're going through this process. That's the only thing that'll move them, guys. Not drop your price, not buy and pressuring them and anything else. It's talk about their pain point, talk about their pleasure point. Let them come around and make the decision to buy or make the decision to sell. Okay? That's our job. Step number 2 is you got to have a process. You can't wing it. Okay, so you build a plan, you manage their expectations, you educate them, you show them, you don't tell them, you have a communication step, you become their trusted advisor, you have a step-by-step process, and at the end of the day, you remind yourself that when you're not talking to them, when you're not sharing with them, when you're not in contact with them, that silence is deafening to those people. And that's the number one reason why we get fired. And the number one reason why we get rehired by another client is because that silence was deafening with the last agent. The other thing they complain about is that there wasn't really any contact, any community. They put the sign up and they left us alone. Or they just left the auto email listing searches come on. We never heard, we never had any contact. Guys, we're in the relationships business. We're in the human touch business. You got to have a process. You got to have a plan. And you got to be in touch and you got to be in contact. That's what we do. That's what we do in that. And when you're panicked and you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do, they're panicked too. Their silence is killing them and it's deafening to them as well. So don't wing it. Build a plan. So what kind of plan are we looking at? So first things first, I always sit down with my buyers and sellers and determine their preferred method of communication. I don't know about you guys, but we have a number of agents in that. It takes me 17 different ways to get everybody to come to a mandatory office meeting in our company because we have so many different generations. So you can't assume that you know someone's preferred method of communication. A millennial, they might want you to Snapchat them or Facebook message them. A traditionalist, well, they just want to sit down and have tea and talk. Right? A boomer, they want you to tell them how awesome they are and phone them and let them know how awesome they are. Right? A Gen Xer, they just want you to text them and keep them abreast of things and email them and that. So there's all these different methods of preferred methods of communication. I don't know what it is, but it's my job to ask them and set up the expectations and determine what their method or methods of preferred communication is, so I'm on point with them. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So what they're running from and what they're running to. Build a structured, organized, step-by-step process and plan. Identify their preferred method or methods of communication. Don't assume. That word assume. Ask you and me. Don't assume it is. And you might find people are offended by your method of communication. I struggle because I tell the millennials in my office, guys, I don't Facebook or Snapchat. Facebook message, I'm sorry. I check it once in a while, but it's not my preferred method of communication. But that's my problem because I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm a texter and an emailer, or even more so, a borderline traditionalist. Just pick up the phone and let's talk. What a novel concept, right? So those would be my preferred methods. So I got to understand that. So sit down with them, determine that, they'll appreciate it, and then honor it and use those methodologies and preferred methods of communication. Okay? Step number 4 is the frequency. So I'm a firm believer, under promise, over deliver. Okay, so if they say, hey, Wade, we want to meet from you daily, we want to hear from you weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. They say, oh, don't worry about it. We don't need to hear from you. They're lying. Of course they want to hear from you. So you want to set that expectation, and I'm going to ask them how you want to hear from me, and they're going to ask you when you want to hear from me. And then I'm going to over-deliver. I'm going to shorten that time delivery up in half. So if you say weekly, I'm going to touch base with you twice a week. I don't have very many clients that say daily, let's be honest, right? But bi-weekly, I'll hit it weekly if you're asking me bi-weekly. Whatever you say that your expectation is, I'm going to cut it in half and double it because I want to over-deliver and under-promise. Question, go for it.
Yeah, so what if they say, we'll call you, Jamil, and you're like, well, usually I respond, it's okay to call you next week. That's how we respond.
Yeah.
when they say, that.
Yeah. So when I call you before you called me, I over delivered, right? I over
Yeah.
delivered. You asked me to just allow you to call me, but when I call you first, now I have over delivered. I've won. I've done my job. I want to over deliver based on what you expect from me, and that's what we're in the business of over delivery and over service and over love and over communicate, and that's the problem with us, is that we're not over loving, we're not over communicating, we're not over delivering, we're under promising, we're under delivering, we're under communicating, we're killing ourselves, right? We're our worst enemy, because I got nothing to say. But they'd rather me call them and say, there's nothing to report. Just want you to know that your home's high priority to me and my company, my team here, and we're going to get it sold and whatever else. And if you have any thoughts or ideas of things that you'd like to see changed or improved on, you don't hesitate to call me. Have a great day. Take care, right? Like, that's what I'm talking about. That's the communication. How many of you would appreciate a heads up once in a while, or at somewhat in the process about what's going on, and that you're not just sitting there where the silence is deafening in our relationship, right? Like,
well, I'm talking about a prospect.
yeah.
They're like, they sound like they want to do something, but then they're like,
yeah, sorry. So yeah, from a buyer prospect,
I'll call you.
Yeah, good question, Jamil. I've got a flow here on follow-up process. I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you there's a hot, a warm, and a cold, and I'm going to show you the method of follow-up on that and how to over-deliver that in a second. So you're leading me into that. That's great.
Sure.
That's great.
Sure.
Okay, so you're over-delivering and under-promising, okay? I want to talk to the sellers on the simplest way to show their property, not the Indiana Jones adventure way to show their property. You want to educate them on that. Agents don't want it to be difficult. They'll say that they'll refuse to show your property if it's quick and too difficult to show. You'd agree with me with that comment. And you got to also educate sellers now on the paradigm shift on virtual showings versus traditional physical showings, right? And explain to them that my job as a qualifying agent, because that's one of the things that you hired me as a listing agent was to qualify, is that there's going to be a tremendous amount of virtual traffic and virtual showings versus physical showings, because I'm going to qualify hard and I'm going to be using virtual showing technology to be able to do that. And I want you to understand that and educate them that it's what's going on virtually versus physically. I don't know if you know this, but there's a statistic out there through NAR that for every 100 online virtual viewings of that, you should have one physical showing, okay? And for every 10 physical showings, you should have an offer in place if it's priced correctly. So those numbers might help you guys as a guide with your sellers of the 100 to 1 to 10 number, which is 100 onlines versus one physical showing, 10 physical showings, one physical offer, good or bad. Those are the kind of numbers that we're looking at. So if you have a house that's got 800 viewings and showings on virtual showings and traffic and that, and we don't have any showings, then Houston physical showings, then we've got a problem, right? And if we've got 10 physical showings and we don't have an offer, then we've got a problem again there, okay? So educate them on the numbers and the shift from physical versus virtual and that, and how it's changed. Buyers, you talk about this. Are you looking to buy a home or are you looking to buy a deal? Okay. And I ask this every time. Okay. What's a home? It's 102% of asking price. It's this price. It's this thing. It's got to move quick. This, that. What's a deal? Well, it might be 96% of asking price. It needs homes. It's got something that's wrong with it. It's got an issue in that. So I need to ask the buyer, are you looking to buy a home or are you looking to buy a deal? And how many of us are explaining the unique difference between buying a home in our marketplace and buying a deal in our marketplace, because they're legitimately different types of products and that you're buying. Does that make sense? Okay?
Yep.
In our marketplace, you got to lean into a buyer. And one of my mentors said, you ask them every time, can they see themselves living here? Do you like this enough to buy? If you don't ask, folks, you don't get. So you lean in, and there's real subtle, confident, and easy ways of asking people, is this the one? Can you see yourself living here? Do you like this one enough to buy it? Would you like to make an offer? Let's try any offer, right? So closings. If you don't ask, you don't get. And a lot of times, agents forget. They do a good job of showing them through the house and oohing and on and this and that and tour guiding. But guys, you're in sales and you got to ask every home you show, do they like it enough to buy it? Can they see themselves living here? And I would encourage you to ask 2-3 times, because you'll increase your conversion rate by 62% by just asking 3 or more times if they can see themselves living there, if they like to buy this one. Is this the one? Okay? So lean in more. And if you know if it's the right thing to do, and if you know it's the right one, lean even more if you know it's the right one, right? And I always tell people, hey, if I'll tell you if I would buy this myself, and why I wouldn't buy this myself, because at the end of the day, I want to be your transaction, and I want to be your agent for life. And it's not just today's transaction; it's multiple transactions, referrals, and things like that. So I'm going to tell you whether we should buy this one, or if I would buy it, and why not, and why we should. Okay. So there's a couple of tips for you when it comes to showings for buyers and sellers. Okay, and asking the buyer to buy, and explaining to the listing agent the difference between the virtual showings now versus the traditional showings. Okay, and lean into both of them. Lean into them. Do you want to stay, or do you want to sell? Do you want a home, or do you want a deal? Do you want to buy, or do you want to tour around? Right? That's our job, to lean in when we know it's the right thing for them to do. You hear me say? We're in the persuasion business, but I'm in the persuasion business when I know with the heart of my hearts and my gut that this is the right thing to do. They should buy this. They should take this offer. They should sell. They shouldn't stay in that. I'm going to let them know that how I feel about that, and be passionate about it, and lean in. Okay? That's our job. It's a big responsibility. It's intimidating, but that's what it is. Okay? Now, a buyer's commitment. Old school. Auto email alert, check the hot sheets, and wing it. We don't sign them to any commitment. Okay? All right? So I'm a firm believer that the document of the exclusive buyer's agreement is the greatest document ever made in that, and you can qualify people whether they want to buy or buy by using this document. But again, using a presentation, using a process, using a program, and letting them know the value proposition of hiring you, and why you as their buyer's agent. Okay, and letting them know that the old school version was most agents just set you up to auto email listing alerts, check on the hot sheets, and if you see something, that's great. The new school buyer agent now is leaning into their database and reaching out, going after the expireds, going after exclusives, pockets, peer listings, going off to local Facebook pages, classified ads. They're door knocking, they're flyering. Like, we're proactive. The old guard buyer agent was reactive. Okay, so I'm looking to be hired as a proactive buyer agent and not a reactive old school agent. That's the fundamental difference between a buyer agent today in 2019 versus one in 2010. Would you agree? And then in order to get me to hire me as that proactive versus reactive buyer's agent, I'm going to ask you, just like my sellers, to hire me and sign an agreement and a contract to hire me as your agent. Okay? No pressure, no obligation whatsoever. I just need to know that if I'm going to put this proactive approach in place as a buyer's agent, I want your commitment, just like a listing agent before I spend all the money advertising their home.
And wait, I just have a comment.
Please.
So I learned something to say. It's a loyalty agreement.
Yes.
In order for me to help you without possible conflicts of interest, protect your confidentiality,
yes,
and operate in your best interest, I'm required to have you sign this agreement to represent you as an agent.
Awesome.
And if they're apprehensive, you say, I sense a little apprehension. I tell you what, if you get to a point in the process where you don't like working with me, then I won't have a problem ending our agreement. I just ask that you let me know as soon as possible. How does that sound?
Perfect. And you let them know that it's an easy exit, right? It's easy, easy in, easy out. I have no reason to hold people to, hold them hostage if they're not happy with me and how the job I'm performing, and let you know that it's an easy exit, and I'll null and void this agreement at any time.
And if you're going to meet them for the first time, take the agreement with you to the showing. Maybe they'll sign it.
Yeah, and then, or give them a copy and say, let's have coffee and meet again, and let's talk about it more in detail, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Then they can go through it all after. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like my wife, who worked in a law firm for 18 years, she'll want you to bring that on the first visit and then let her read through it, and then she'll be more inclined to want to sign it when we get together the next time, right?
Say again? I'm sorry.
Like my wife, who worked at a law firm for 18 years, she'd be more inclined to have a copy of it, have a chance to peruse it, and then sit down and sign it when we get together the next time, not on the initial out in the field. Yeah.
So you can give it to them, and when you meet with them next time, you give them your presentation.
Exactly. Yeah, and you give them that 20 minutes of why you and why your company and why now, and what's your value proposition of what and the benefits to them of this agreement, right? And not benefits to me. Okay?
Right.
Okay, seller feedback. Again, do you have a system on getting showing feedback? Do you have a system on giving showing feedback? I set up a seller's day. I set up a buyer's day for counseling, and that you pick a set day, a set time in your week schedule, and then And remember, even just a courtesy call saying we tried 3-4 times to get feedback, we didn't get any feedback, so we're just going to have to assume that no news is not good news, right? Because that's better than silence, and the sellers get so frustrated because they're so anxious. They want to hear, they want to hear, they want to hear, okay? So make sure you have a system. And a lot of times, guys, it wasn't even myself. They were just happy to hear from Barbara or from Kelly, my VA, my assistants, just on the fact that they called and let them know that we tried 3-4 times and couldn't get anything, and we're just going to have to assume it's that. And they were very grateful and very appreciative of just letting them know that they didn't have anything back, and we tried our best. And that is just, that took our value proposition and our customer satisfaction up so much higher, just to let them know that we tried and that we couldn't get anything for them. Okay, all right. And so make sure you have a process for feedback in place. Make sure you have a recording process in place, a distribution, a feedback process, a day and a time, and make sure you have scheduled your buyers counseling and your sellers counseling certain days of the week, certain times of the week, and figure out when it's the better times in your schedules when you have time to sit down for that hour or two and do that. Okay. Now, moving forward, you build a report, and you set a seller's reporting day, and then you pick a day and time and you deliver that report. Now, again, based on the preferred method of communication, if I email that report, mail that report, hand deliver it, again, I believe that the hand delivering of the report for the seller and mailing that delivery report and that when they physically have the report, I think it just perceives more value than just an electronic email. Anybody can email a report. Not everybody gets in their car and drives over and drops off that report, and then you follow up, phone call them. Does that make sense? And you do that. Okay, there's a huge difference, would you agree, in the perception of a physical report delivered than just an emailed report. Okay, I don't want to meet their expectation. I want to exceed their expectations, and I want their perception of the value I deliver in the report, the physical report. I want to deliver it physically because it just perceptually looks like I'm delivering more value than just sending another PDF email. Okay, that's my personal opinion, and I think it differentiates myself from my competitors in that, and it's just the level of service that I want to provide at that level. Now, what are in my reports? I've got all the reports on listings and sales and expireds that are similar to their listing this past week. I've got I always share the list of ongoing market activities that I shared with them in my original listing presentation, because after the first week, they forgot everything you told them at the listing presentation, right? So you make sure that in your report, these are the ongoing things that we shared with you in our listing presentation back a week ago, 2 ago, 3 ago, and we're still doing these things, and these things are working for you 24/7. Here are area statistics. Here are the media reports. Here are the showings, the feedback, the comments on the showings. Here's what's going on with sign calls, ad calls, email inquiries. There's some online activity. Here's the offline activity. And my last little nugget is every week I always share one marketing idea that could help their house sell besides telling them to drop their price. And this document's called the Saleability Checklist. So I'll share each week another little nugget idea, like maybe getting it staged. And then the following week, maybe changing their price to an odd listing price, like 888s and an odd number list price like 567 at the end of it, so that it's a marketing technique or a marketing idea other than telling them to drop their price. Yes, that's the answer, but they want to hear from you guys a marketing idea each week that's different than telling them to drop their price. You tick them off by telling them that. When you're sharing marketing ideas, after 3 weeks, they're like, you know what, Wade? All your ideas are great, but wouldn't it just be easier for you if we just reduced our price? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think of that. Thank you so much, right? And then it's their idea to drop their price instead of all my crazy, corny marketing ideas that I'm sharing with them each week in my report. Okay, so here's the basic outline of what that report looks like. Here's a sample of one of my coaching clients' report and what it looks like and how he delivered it in this package that I'll let you have a copy of in the slide deck here as well. And then here's a copy of our snapshot, and you guys all know market snapshot of what's going on and the activities in that. Setting them up to the listings and the sales and the expired so they can see what their competitors are doing, coming on, going off, and successful on the marketplace. And you build yourself up a nice detailed report that you're delivering on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis, okay? And that's an example of what I expect to do for a seller, okay? And then every 21 days, I'll have Kelly or Barb set up a face-to-face scheduled meeting at my office, okay? I'm a firm believer that we're professional advisors. You need to set up a time for you to professionally advise and have those advisement meetings. It's all business. They come to the office, you sit down, and it's time to talk. We review the reports. We review all of the 5, 6, 7 and why they hired me to sell them. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to either ask him to reposition or release me of my obligation, right? So my dialogue is this. I'm saying, the one thing that I can't afford to have fail you guys is have your home not sold, okay? So in order for me to do this, I'm going to ask you to either reposition or release. It's up to you if you'd like to sell or you'd like to stay. Because here's what's going to move forward. Next week when someone asks you, hey, Jamil, you had your home on the market, I want you to say, Wade told us it was not the right time and that we should stay. And the market wasn't meeting our expectations. Instead of, Wade sucked, he did a terrible job, he couldn't sell our house, and we had to fire him and take it off the market of that. So I don't want that happening. I want you to just either choose to sell or to stay. The choice is yours. Here's a reposition and reduction form, or here's a release form. The decision is up to you, okay? Now, this is where I'm adamant that it's been enough time and we've got to do something different, because insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, okay? So these are face-to-face, in-office meetings where you're reviewing everything, and then you're sitting them down and asking them, do you want to sell or do you want to stay? And the choice is theirs. And either way, I'm either getting released of my obligation, which is fine because they're not going to stay because there's not enough motivation, enough why there, or they're going to reposition and we're going to get it sold. Either way, it's a win-win for everybody, okay? But you need to, when you hear me say it, when you see me say it, when it's compelling on a face-to-face advisory meeting, is so different than over the telephone or by text or email, okay? So bring them in every 21 days. If your market's really hot, maybe bring them in every 14 days. Okay, should be a face-to-face meeting every 14 to 21 days, depending on the flow of your marketplace. Okay, now a couple of other tips for you to maybe help you on sellers repositioning or seller reductions. Okay, so a couple things. I'll pre-sign a price reduction at the first day of the listing, and then give them a courtesy call. Easier to give a courtesy call and get a pre-signed price reduction. Here's how I do it. In order for me to keep momentum on your listing, in order for me to go back and capture all the people that came through that may not have made an offer, before we lose them buying another property, I'm going to ask you to give me a pre-signed repositioning price reduction, right? And I'm going to submit that in the first 14 or 21 days. And then I'm going to quickly make phone calls and go back and see if I can capture some of those buyers that came through before they bought something else. So I'm going to ask you to help me help you and pre-signing so that I can submit that and then go back and capture those buyers leads before we lose them. Okay, so that's one pre-signed price reduction strategy. Number two is the Price is Right game. I'll pull up in front of homes, show them photos, and then I'll ask them to guess the sale price. And then I'll preview their 3 or 2 most competitive listings and go through them, and then we'll go for coffee. After seeing the most recent sales and photos and guessing the game of what it sold for, and then going through some of the ones that are competing against them in the listings and previewing them, then I'll ask them where they think their house should be and where we're at, okay? And going through that methodology and that Price is Right game and them physically going through that process helps tremendously. I may consider a third-party appraisal, or my last option is to do an office pricing team. So bring high experienced agents and my pricing team through their home. They'll write down on the back of their business card the estimate sale price and have my office pricing team come through and make suggestions on what the sale price is, and let that as another resource for them to see a third party voice with my office pricing team. And then for those of you that are forgetting in this market, if you have a buyer and a buyer's agent that can't bring you an offer, don't forget that the listing agent can write a reverse offer. So you can write a seller-initiated offering contract, and for a buyer and a buyer's agent in the bushes that can't get them to paper, why not the selling agent and the listing agent write a reverse offer to the buyer agent? Does that make sense, you guys? So using that reverse offer strategy, when you know you got a buyer's agent that showed it a couple times and can't get pen to paper, I'll, as a listing agent, suggest let's write them a deal and get it going here and reverse offer them, and it happens and it works a lot. Okay.
Do you mean you write the offer and give it to the buyer?
That is correct. You give it to the buyer's agent from you and your seller to the buyer that was in the woods and their buyer's agent. Give it to them, and you initiate, you start it from the listing side instead of the buyer side all the time.
Nice.
It works awesome. And my sellers love the idea. You mean we can start? Yeah, let's start. Let's throw an offer their direction. They're like, okay, we can do that? Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Let's do it. Now, keep in mind, if I send it to them and they accept it, you better be happy if they sign it and sign it up and accept it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but so that's one strategy I find that most listing agents forget, that it doesn't always have to be from the buyer's agent initiating the contract and the offer, guys. It can be the listing agent and the sellers initiating the contract and the offer process. Okay, it's called a reverse offer. All right, now follow up, and this is your question you had for me, Jamil, earlier. I'm going to say a hot buyer, somebody wants to buy in the next 30, 60, 90 days. Follow up time every 2 days. Every 2 days. A warm buyer, that 6-month time period, every 2 weeks. Cold buyer, 1 year or more, you put them on an auto email, newsletter, drip, you just put them into a system, okay? So every 2 days, every 2 weeks, or every month. That's the follow up, okay? And it could be a simple little thing like this. Anything new? Anything I can do for you today? Checking in? What's up? Anything. That's a follow-up, guys, because I just want to be top of mind. And I don't want to be a pain in the butt and stalker. I just want to check in. So a hot buyer every 2 days, warm buyer every 2 weeks, cold buyer, put them in a system and just communicate once a month, okay? It's usually automated or systemized, all right? Now, the seller reports are every week or every 2 weeks minimum, okay? And presentations in front of the buyers and sitting them down to get the signed EBA and making sure that they're committed to you, just like your sellers. They're committed to you as well as buyers. Okay? It's all in the follow-up, Now, some visuals. Show me, don't tell me. So using visuals. So you have seller visuals, you have grocery line visuals, you have different visuals. And the most powerful sales tool is a blank pad of paper and a pen, where you show them what's happening with the market, where you show them where they're buying in the trend of the market, where you draw them and you show them and you explain to them. You explain to a seller where they're in the lineup with all these people in a grocery store lineup. You show the buyers where, things are starting to go down. You should buy when things are going down, not buy when they're going up, right? And so you draw things and you draw and show them things like charts and statistics and graphs and visuals. That will get them to turn the light bulb on, because they don't trust us when we speak it, but they'll change their thinking and they'll change their feelings when we show them. Does that make sense? So you got to be more visual in a changing and transitioning marketplace than a verbal. It's verbal schmerble and visuals, draw it, explain to them and bring it up. I'm a visual learner, so I get it when someone draws it out for me and writes it out for me versus communicating and speaking to me, okay? And so that makes a huge difference in using visuals for most buyers and sellers, okay? Now, the last thing, just to summarize, you need to know what their why is, their hot button, what their pain point is, or what their pleasure point is, okay? Determine their preferred method of communication. Don't wing it. Set a time, build a report, have a process, follow that process, okay? Constant contact every 2 days, every 2 weeks, or every month, okay? The reduce or release, okay? The buy or bye-bye, right? This is what we do. This is how we do it. These are the seller counseling processes. These are the buyer processes. This is how we are going to get people to buy or go buy, or sellers to stay, or sellers to sell. That's what we do. They either sell or they stay. They either buy or they go bye-bye, right? That's our job, and it's up to us in that. So keep calm, have a process, practice what you say and how you say it, go through it. Don't wing it. You wing it, you're going to get wing it results in that. Any other questions for me about the buyer process, the seller process, the reports, the packaging, the timing on buyers follow-up, the timing on sellers follow-up, the face-to-face meetings, the pre-signed price reductions, the reduce or release close with the sellers and that? Any other thoughts or comments or questions for me before we wrap up today? Was it helpful?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. This, in any changing market, you go back to basics. This is fundamentals, guys. You got to have dialed in seller counseling skills, seller counseling processes, seller counseling process communications with buyers and sellers. Like, this is what separates us. This is what moves the buyer and moves the seller's emotional meter to get them to buy or to go buy. Okay? All right? And this skill set is where, you can't rely on that anymore, because you actually have to show up now. You actually have to do something for the buyers and sellers to get them to get through this process and get through this as things cool off. And they'll cool off, and they're not going to stay all as easy as it is. But these skills are fundamental skills that are traditional skills that you're going to need, and you're going to need to know. And if you don't need them yet, you're going to need them more and more as time goes on here. Don't worry. Would you agree? Is it's changing, and you're starting to find you're going to need more and more of these processes and these reports and these skills now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions, any comments, or anything else I can help you guys today? We're good? All right.
Good, Wade.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you found this helpful and informative. I'll get you the deck, I'll get you the recording, and I'll get you this information out to you guys, including that list of those saleability, those marketing ideas for sellers. I'll get you that list as well, so that you have an idea of the things that you can feed them each week. That's a marketing idea, other than reducing their price each week. Okay, I'll get you that sheet as well. All right, you guys. You take care. Have a good day. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Okay, take care for now.
Bye.
Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.